With former senior foreign policy advisor to Minister Netanyahu, Caroline Glick. Welcome to First Edition.
Thanks so much for having me on your program, guys.
Great to have you, Caroline. Daniel Cohen just reported that Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is ready to agree to a hostage ceasefire deal in Gaza, but vowing the conflict won't end until Hamas is destroyed. What's next in this back and forth that we're seeing here?
Well, Israel has a couple more weeks, they think, of heavy fighting in the city of Rafah until they've destroyed the remaining conventional forces that Hamas fields in that city. And then what we're going to see is a move towards a phase of lower intensity, but still quite significant fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas, Islamic Jihad, etc., in Gaza, because then they'll be reduced to the level of terror cells. They'll be operating as they have been throughout from the tunnels, etc., but it's not going to be major formations, and they'll be less well organized as fighting forces, because the idea is we're taking out their command and control infrastructure right now. Israel was able to eliminate the number 4 in Hamas over the weekend. He was in charge of operations on the ground in Gaza, so he's no longer there. Also, the number 3 was taken out several months ago, I think, and so that's what's happening now. So it's going to move to a more of a counterinsurgency or counter-terror operation from what it has been now, which is high-level, high-intensity warfare.
Families of the remaining Israeli hostages held by Hamas terrorists are even more fearful now that their loved ones are no longer alive. Is there any more details on their whereabouts or conditions, and can any information be trusted at this point?
You know, right now we're still operating under the assessment that about 40 of the 120 that are being held in Gaza have been killed. So we're talking about 80, more or less 79, 80 that Israel is still assessing as being alive. The Americans were saying that they think that 50% of the 120 are likely dead. Whatever the case, from the 4 that the IDF were able to rescue, they painted a very grim picture of the conditions that our hostages are being held in terms of mental and physical torture, forced Quranic readings to try to get them to convert to Islam, and of course the sexual violence against our women, which we already knew about. So, you know, people are very, very concerned. In fact, you know, it's a very tortuous feeling for the parents. I interviewed the cousin of Shiri Bibas, who was kidnapped with her 2 small sons, her infant Kfir and her 4-year-old Ariel, on October 7th, and her husband Yarden was also taken hostage and beaten in front of the camera several times and emotionally tortured. So the families go through hell every waking minute, and also when they're asleep. So it's an absolutely horrific situation for them, and obviously it's even worse for the hostages themselves.
Well, President Biden, we've been hearing from Netanyahu, decided to withhold a significant amount of American weapons shipments to the IDF. And Netanyahu said that he came out to talk about this particular decision, despite it not being one that many are saying that would garner even more support from the United States. Certainly in a month, we're hearing that Democrats intend on boycotting Netanyahu's visit to Capitol Hill. What do you make of Netanyahu's comments with respect to Biden, and how can the administration, their decision to end the emergency fast-tracking of weapons to Israel, affect the IDF's operation overall?
So the main concern right now is that as the high-intensity operations in Gaza are going to start winding down in a couple of weeks, we're going to be moving the bulk of our forces up to Lebanon, because that's where we have an even larger war ahead of us with Hezbollah. And one of the things that's been pretty clear since December, January, is that the Biden administration is doing everything that it can to prevent Israel from securing northern Israel from Hezbollah. They don't want to have a major war in Lebanon and in northern Israel because Hezbollah is for many, many reasons, but they don't. And the problem is that, over the months, they've been stringing us along with weapons that we need, particularly for the North, and not transferring them, even though they were approved by Congress and signed by, the requisition was signed into law by President Biden, because, and many of them Israel bought from the United States. It doesn't come through an aid package because they were thinking that if they don't give us arms, that we weren't going to have to go to war. But the problem is that, it's not only Israel that's noticed that we're not getting the weapons. Hezbollah is noticing, Iran is noticing. And so the point is that by treating Israel this poorly, the United States is increasing the chance that we are going to have to fight a war with Hezbollah, a massive war with Hezbollah, beginning this summer. And so what Netanyahu said was he has to get them. The United States has to show that they support Israel in a significant way if there's to be any chance of avoiding this massive war. And so that was the decision that he made to actually expose us. And I have to just say on that thing is that the United States, actually, the administration was leaking that they weren't preventing Israel with arms, going back at least to an NBC report that came out in late January. So this isn't, now they're denying it, but it was actually the White House and the State Department that were leaking over the past several months that indeed they are not sending Air Force ordnance, tank and artillery shells to Israel as requisitioned and as approved by Congress. So it was the administration that was getting the story out, and now they're saying that's not true, and we don't know what Netanyahu is talking about. Of course, they know what he's talking about because they've been linking it to the press since January.
So the war against Hamas and Hezbollah are different, but they're still terrorists. With that said, if Netanyahu cannot get the cooperation from Biden, what are his alternatives? Are other nations able to step in and fill that gap, namely, let's say, nations within the European Union, possibly England, and so forth?
Well, a story came out yesterday that actually we've lost 5 Hermes drones, which are like unmanned airplanes that were shot down by Hezbollah in Lebanon. And actually, we joint developed the Hermes with India. And so India said that they're transferring Hermes drones to Israel that were supposed to go to the Indian military, and they're moving them over to Israel. And so India is a major military partner with Israel in military development and procurement. They buy a lot of military hardware from Israel. And so I think that we're going to see much more of that kind of cooperative relationship going forward. But as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we have to fight with what we have. It would be better if the United States was keeping its word and transferring to us the weapons that it already approved for us. But if we don't get them, then we don't have any choice. I mean, that's the thing that I don't understand exactly why it is so hard for the administration to understand. Nobody wants to fight this war. The perseverance of the Israelis is for many reasons, but one of them is because we don't have any choice. This is a war for our survival, and we saw what destruction looks like on October 7th, and nobody wants to relive it, no matter how hard and no matter how high the price. It's just, there is no choice here. Either we'll do it with American support or we'll do it without American support, but we don't have any choice but to go forward. And I think that's really what the frustration here is with the Biden administration, is the refusal to recognize that nobody's making choices here about whether to go forward or not. Except our enemies. It's our enemies who have made life impossible to live in northern Israel. So it's because of our enemies that we have to push them away from the border. And the only way that we can do that is through military force.
Well, Caroline Glick, thank you so much for your insights this morning and for joining us in First Edition.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on your program.
Up next, Alex Salvi.